So we're going to go into some details about a few cases linked to Barry Young, who is serving a sentence for directing a criminal organisation. He's the Sligo sort of mob boss, we've been told, who has been described as an international player in court. And yet I think these cases show the regional nature of his business, and even the kind of the figures involved are quite small when we're talking about drugs. 3 cases, 3 similar enough stories. And well, look, give us the details first, and then we can go into it a bit.
Okay, so basically there was 3 people who appeared in court, and they were sentenced in relation to drug dealing offences. There was money laundering offences as well. They all have addresses in Sligo, and we can go into each in more detail. But essentially, they're all parents. They're all in their kind of age 30s, early 40s, and they gave evidence that they all had met Barry Young from the area. And this obviously came to light because of phone evidence that was found. Messages were found on WhatsApp messages were found between Barry Young and these people. And this is how all of these offences came to light. Then there were search warrants executed. But basically, they all pleaded guilty to different offences. One guy, Keith Harris, pleaded guilty to 7 offences, including possession of cocaine for sale and supply, possession of the mixing agent benzocaine for sale and supply, having cash as well. And it was told, in court that he met Barry Young, he'd known him from the area, but he essentially got himself into drug debt. He said he originally was, just using with friends, and then that he got himself into, I think it was $7,000 drug debt with Barry Young, and he was essentially trying to make out that Barry Young was in fear of him and he was using him. But, there was also messages between the two where he was talking about how he'd make a bit of cash for his holidays. So there was a bit of
So he was enjoying the proceeds of his criminal offences as well as claiming to be in fear of Barry Young.
Exactly, yeah. And, texts were read out between the two. And I think Judge Keenan Johnson actually said, you did enjoy yourself, you did go on holidays. But his defence obviously played into the fact that he felt under threat and, went into the fact that he had no previous convictions. His relationship with his mother and the mother of his children broke down. I think they subsequently got back together, but she went into all of this kind of mitigating factors, but there was no sort of hiding with the messages that were sent between the two. And then there was obviously other 2 co-accused as well. The other guy's name was, Michael Duffy. Michael Duffy was also a father, and he was sentenced for money laundering. So he was in possession of crime proceeds.
What age is he?
He is 42, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so he was obviously in his 40s as well.
And these offences are carried out in recent years. So.
Yes. So basically, Barry Young was arrested on a flight in 2020, I believe. And then these warrants were executed in 2021 on the back of, basically they found messages between all of the 3 accused. And
they went found 16,000 WhatsApp messages on Barry Young's phone. So this is sort of the kickback from all that communication.
I mean, you're talking
these people.
Yeah. But it does strike you as quite regional, doesn't it? Like, I mean, maybe it's that we'll
go into the details and we'll come back to that, because we do have a few questions around all this.
Yeah.
That we're going to.
Yeah.
I mean, the third woman was a woman called Sinead McCormick, and her probably offence is of the lowest level. Basically, she facilitated the importation of benzocaine, which is, I think, it's a thing used by
mixing agent.
Naturally, it's the thing that dentists use.
Famously, love-hate.
Yeah, exactly. So that was ordered from China, which I suppose would be an international dimension.
Yeah.
To it, and she facilitated that.
What age is she, Niall?
She had previous convictions, and she was roughly 40 years old, I think it was.
So they're all quite an age.
Yeah.
She was from Wales, and she had a daughter that was 18, and her excuse, she gave excuses about her mum dying and things like that. But it was certainly, it was described how she was used basically by another man who was named in court, who was an associate of Barry Young, and she was basically to receive this package, which these things are monitored, aren't they, of course, because for the obvious reason that this benzocaine is known for what it's used for.
And all 3 have kind of claimed in their defence and put to the court that, while they've pleaded guilty, they have said that they kind of got sort of met up with Barry Young or as an associate in their late 30s, shall we say, that they sort of started using cocaine, or one or two of them have certainly said that, and quickly became addicted. And that all these offences happened sort of very quickly. They lived in fear of Barry Young.
Yeah, and actually Michael Duffy, he's the 42-year-old father of three, he actually said that he started taking cocaine after bereavement, and then it just spiraled, and he was smoking cannabis, and at one point he owed, I think it was up to 40 grand to Barry Young, and that's how he got into trouble with him. He pleaded guilty to having €28,000 in cash belonging to Young's gang. So it was a money laundering charge that he pleaded guilty to, and also having a small amount of cannabis for sale and supply. But he gave very interesting evidence, because it was heard how, he said basically, then I met that fella, Barry Young, and he kind of tried to suggest that it all sort of his life went under as a result of Young. And he also gave quotes in relation to how he had been good all his life, and then it was 18 months of madness, after he got involved in Young. It was also heard how he was a carer to his mother and sister, who subsequently died at the time, and that he was a quadriplegic from a crash as well. So there was a lot of that kind of evidence. It was also heard that he had no previous convictions, and that Keith Harris had no previous convictions. As Niall said, Sinead did have previous convictions from 2012, but there was a strong case put not to jail her. So,
but it is incredible, like the evidence from Mr. Harris, because he's openly speaking about Barry Young.
I mean, this is
really, really, really
it is
rare.
Quite strange, and some of it is coming from his arrest and the statements he's given during arrest, where he clearly names him and basically informs essentially on his activities.
I mean, there's obviously text between them, so it's pointless to deny it. But like nearly always, you hear in evidence he couldn't say
no comment.
Got the drugs from because he was in fear of his life. But there's evidence between them of even chats where he's talking about his defense solicitor says he was being controlled by Barry Young, and he says at one point, when they're discussing the sale of drugs and the people who owe him money, it says it shows how Young is directing him, Harris, what to do. It's like Garda MacDonald. So there's all this very specifics about Barry Young.
And he tells the Gardaí that he's run up a cocaine debt of 7,000 to Young.
Yeah.
That as a result, he's controlled by him and living in fear by him.
Yeah.
I don't know, does this totally equate with the Barry Young that we have been presented with evidence during sentencing that he is this international drug trafficker controlling a network, a gang of up to 20? The courts have been told, as part of these cases, that he is suspected of being behind a number of murder plots and etc. Like, it seems low level, this business that you could be controlled for 7,000, that this big, huge drug dealer who shouldn't really be mixing with the great unwashed is going around sort of identifying people at that age of their life, middle age, with no sort of addiction background, and is as clearly, I mean, in one way he's been presented as this international drug trafficker. In another way, he's kind of been presented as a street dealer who gets
he's intimately he's intimately involved in the four-figure sums of money. Either the debt of or the collection of those money, and obviously the seizures in this case are pretty small, even of the money. I think the biggest one is 28,000. So I think you see a couple of things. I mean, the Guard give evidence of being monitoring the Barry Young Organised Crime Group, as it's called, and he says at one point that they seized 1.3 million worth of drugs in total off that organisation. So that is a large scale. The international dimension, he's ordering benzocaine from China. I don't know if that qualifies you as makes you a transnational dealer, but I suppose this is a snapshot of a period of time. If you add it all up, it's still a huge amount of money for ordinary people. If it was a business and you were going on Dragon's Den, you'd say that's a thriving turnover. However, like if you're comparing it to, 2 tons of coke on the MV Matthew and container ships, and comparing it to Maurice O'Shea Salazar with planes and people in ports all over Europe, it does seem quite small scale.
It does. And I mean, that 1.3 million of controlled drugs, right, that were seized, and money and whatever, it's amphetamines and Xanax and tablets, street tablets, all this sort of stuff. that was the culmination of 30 separate investigations, mostly undercover, and a lot of which stemmed from the phone seizures, which in a way, led the Gardaí directly to these individuals. So you have to bear that in mind with it. I mean, if anybody has the headspace to divide 1.3 by 30 separate investigations, we can get an average of nobody.
Yeah.
Well, at one point,
it's been a long day.
But you're talking about 40 or 50,000, like each of 30, I suppose. And I mean, I suppose the other point is that we do know.
Always comes up Trumsy.
Yeah. Well, he has to always get.
He's got a mind like Rain Man or something.
Yeah,
I mean, the figures are.
Or just loves to be right.
But I suppose this is a snapshot again, because Barry Young, we do know also was dealing with people, for example, across the border. We don't see any of, in Barry Young's case either, he has all of these 11,000 or whatever it was WhatsApp messages, but the people he's being supplied by, they're not featured in that WhatsApp. So it's almost inevitable that he was using some sort of encrypted phone for other bits of business.
They could have been featured in it, and there could be, a bit of pick and choose about what's being used, because of course, we go back again always to the EncroChat hack, and, is the Young organisation on that, or is some of the cross-border stuff going to come out in trials in the north? Like, Young has been named by the media and indicated by the PSNI to be the international drug trafficker that they believe is behind the organisation of the murder of Robbie Lawler in Belfast. And he's been actively investigated in the course of that, murder inquiry. And the Garda Síochána have been working and have been giving details and information and some, CCTV and some traffic movements and stuff like that to their colleagues in the north. So, that's the sort of level that they're looking at. And of course, we've been told that Young was himself living under threat in his own defence. He said he was under threat from a major dealer. He didn't name the Mr. Big network, but that's what we're putting two and two together with, that he was sort of planning to move to Spain that time that he was arrested. He had no money to pay back this debt that he'd run up, and yet the Gardaí follow him to Spain, where they believe he has a network of properties. And he certainly made some money, undoubtedly. Give me a drug dealer that doesn't travel to and from Spain to their villas and all the rest of it. Is he an international organised crime leader, or is he a localised regional kingpin?
Well, I think he is. You can see he's a regional kingpin, and and that there is big money to be made. But you can see maybe we've been spoiled by dealing with the scale of the kid organisation. Where
spoiled when it comes
you
to
are
drug dealers.
because you could, I think you are,
You're too highbrow.
You don't. You're looking
down my nose on Barry Young here.
I mean,
but you're right though, because you don't often see so much communication from on high, or as it appears to be, to the lower level people. And he obviously wasn't very good at hiding his messages, and the fact that he was so involved with these people who claimed that they only were doing it for drug debts, that he didn't have any middlemen
and hands on,
to do his dirty work for him. It is strange.
Following up those few thousand, I mean, it just seems that he should have been looking down his nose in this kind of work, that there should be a layer between him and these people. I also think it's kind of slightly curious that these people are the wrong age.
Well,
aren't they?
Well, I suppose they are in terms of, but I suppose they're
with their stories, they should be in their 20s.
Yeah.
Well, but I suppose if you're vulnerable and you have drug addiction and you kind of,
or if you're a bit more cop on and he only wants to use people who don't have loads of convictions or aren't going to blow his money or aren't going to get caught,
maybe aren't hot-headed.
So instead he's looking for people that are, reliable people.
Yeah, because there was a lot of there was work references handed in for Keith Harris. He was actually working in a pharmaceutical company at the time, and now he's working as an apprentice plumber, and that plumbing company gave in a reference into court, and several references were given in. So he is dealing with people that obviously are well
and clearly he is not. He's no previous convictions. He hasn't been caught up in anything like this before. So maybe it is normal for him to go into a police station and to
tell the truth, basically.
You know what I mean? And not have that ability to stare into the corner and say no comment.
I think they found some of the goods though in relation to him in a metal box, and he just, as soon as they found it, he just said, "Oh yeah,
Yeah, no,
I'm working for Barry Young. I think it's like, it was literally, your hand is in a cookie jar, and straight away, I think
hands up.
He spoke
That's like
to the
what I would
guards.
do.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is generally a reluctance to name any names.
Yes.
With anybody involved. So look, I don't know. I mean, that bit of it is certainly unusual. Like we all know from what we hear that people come in, are brought in, are interviewed by Gardaí, and will give a certain amount of information off the record. But when it comes to actually formally making statements, they tend to do anything but name any names. Like that is Sligo, which is a mid-sized town, I suppose, in Ireland. So you can see two things. You can see there is a lot of money floating around in this drugs trade. There's obviously a huge market, not just in like a street dealer, you might say, but it's really feeding ordinary professional people, really, isn't it? So there is big money to be made. And then you can see the consequences of it as well. I mean, the judge says to Mr. Harris, there's absolutely no reason why you should have started taking drugs. Your case is a warning of a life being altered for the worse with a lifelong conviction. And that is the case. I mean, those people now are going to be forever in a mid-sized town. The first thing they say when somebody meets him, what happened to him.
Yeah. And Eimear, is he the guy that suggested that he wouldn't be able to go to the States to see his brother if he had a conviction?
And the judge said, you'll never be able to go to New York to visit your brother. There wasn't much sympathy there. Yeah, but I also think that I get Niall's point, but there's obviously some amount of sympathy for them because, the judge did say to Keith Harris, that you were in it for the money as well. There was also obviously a lot of mitigation given on their behalves, and there was the work references handed in. So sometimes I think maybe there is a more sympathy in the local community for people who say, fell foul, and maybe we're a bit more cynical about those stories than other people will be.
Certainly are.
And particularly with, Michael Duffy, where, there was a lot of difficult background evidence heard in relation to his family circumstances and stuff. So I don't know if maybe they will be given a second chance, and Keith Harris is working as a plumber now.
Yeah, but you also see the text from him to Barry Young. It doesn't sound like he's in fear, because at one point they're discussing money and he says, that'll be a bit of paper for me, it'll pay off my holidays.
Exactly.
And, Barry Young and him discuss, so I think it was 2019, they discuss a drugs drought in Europe. So they're bantering away. It's not as if, do this or not, break your leg. So
yeah,
I mean, there's scales of involvement in everything, I suppose. Certainly.
And as we said, these people are brought before the courts as a ripple effect of a very large investigation into Barry Young's network, which was driven locally by the local police. And they have said that because they were sort of looking at the growth of it.
Yeah. And I think the growth of the violence around the Barry Young organisation. I mean, that is another factor in it. Obviously, these three people here, there's no suggestion they were involved in that sort of side of the violent side. But we've heard during Barry Young's case how violence was regularly used, and also to collect relatively small amounts of money. So that's the other outworking of this business, is that, it's not all consenting adults selling drugs to consenting adults, I suppose. There's the violence, the intimidation that affects families across that whole region. And there is, I suppose, Barry Young, like that has impacted on every town in Ireland, not just the actual physical taking of the drugs, but the effects on the families, and then the effects of that drug intimidation and violence that really has become relatively commonplace across the country, unfortunately.
There's also quite a lot of success in Sligo going back, because this is the second major organisation that the local police units have taken down, the first being the Irwins. And of course, the Irwins were the kings of the town as such, and it was Barry Young kind of comes out of prison just as Irwin is going into prison.
Yeah.
Patrick Irwin is going into prison. And obviously, there's this kind of situation where Young takes up where he finished off. The Irwin gang was quite chaotic, but there was a lot of police resources put in to dismantling them, which I think has been somewhat successful. Now Patrick Irwin is back out and has been sort of back on the scene. But there was, for a local region to take it like that's two quite significant groupings that have been tackled and have been dismantled.
It is, and of course that's the evolution of gangs, is that in order to exist in a town. Like the Irwins brought sort of gun crime really to rural Ireland, didn't they? I mean, Patrick Irwin, and there was shootings and all of that involved in that control of that drug trade. Obviously his own girlfriend was caught with a gun being transported to Sligo. So gun crime of that type was really rare at that point outside of Dublin, or outside of Cork and Limerick, I suppose, as well. So Barry Young, in order to thrive in that environment, also had to be capable of violence. And also then we're seeing with those organisations that although this focuses really on Sligo, and it's again a snapshot of a few people, it also spread out across that region of Ireland as well. And there may be more people coming before the courts in relation to this, but this is a snapshot of people.
I think there are some cases coming before the courts in the coming months, which will involve people maybe closer associated to Young.
Yeah, there has been cases adjourned to later in the year. There definitely will be.
So you're seeing, I think, that you can look as well, you see, with business people, and this is true for big business people as well. They also look after the pennies and the pounds, look after themselves, if you remember that. So they do not like people to get in debts, these drug bosses. They don't allow debts, because if you start allowing smaller debts, it has a ripple effect on their business. People have to believe that you cannot owe these people money and just get away with it.
It's a reputation thing.
It's a reputation thing as well.
It's interesting to see the detail of the case coming out of a regional courtroom.
Yeah, it's a really lengthy copy as well. But it's very interesting, because I know we obviously say that, it's all of what they have said in mitigation, doesn't all add up, but it still is a kind of good example of how these people that maybe there's more than meets the eye, but they still are people with no convictions, people with good jobs, people with children. And, it just kind of is a good example of how.
And who can go under very quickly, can't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Blink of an eye,
very quickly.
Years.
Yeah, because that guy, Michael Duffy, said that he all of a sudden he started taking cocaine after a bereavement, and then all of a sudden owed 40 grand. Had been smoking cannabis. So it's very interesting how, your personal life issues and all that kind of thing, and then all of a sudden you can be.
Who was the court reporter that was there?
Paul Deering from the Sligo Champion.
Thank God for Paul Deering, because we've missed a few cases
over
the course of the last couple of weeks, because there just simply isn't enough reporters regionally.
No.
Courts aren't being covered. Even some significant court cases haven't been covered.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at Sligo, is one of the strengths actually is the court reporting there is really good, particularly from one of our papers in our own stable, the Sligo Champion, So that you see, it's so important, because you do get that snapshot. It shows you the reality of what's going on across the country. So yeah, it's great. It's great work, and they really give it the proper detail,
No, we're very
art,
reliant
though,
on
isn't
our.
it?
No, it is, but like our local, we obviously have strong, relationship with the locals within the Media House group, and even with the Longford, there's been a drive-by shooting of a man in the 70s. Liam Cosgrove has been reporting loads of good stuff on that. So keeping us, it's good to have a kind of a strong.
It really
hand
is.
in those areas, because
Because sometimes you realise that a case has been on somewhere, you try and find who the court reporter was and realise, well, they're just on holidays, so there's nobody else covering for them.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't banks of court reporters out there who are there to capture this stuff.
No.
We have no ability to go back and to ask the court for the transcripts.
Yeah.
We just can't do that unless we have a particular reason. And yet, the kind of 10 years ago, there would have been a reporter in every court in the country.
There's been this more and more, and we even noticed that on a news desk with less court copy coming in, and we think, is it a quiet week? But it's actually just a resource issue.
Yeah.
And a lot of our, like in the Sunday World newspaper, a lot of our great stories come from, the door knocks that we do come from the local court reports.
Absolutely,
so we are heavily reliant on it.
Yeah.
100%.
So if anyone feels that they could set themselves up in a business and start covering the court cases, we would particularly...
It is being addressed by Comishún na Man or whatever, so they are going to look to fund court reporters, because even the state recognises that it's very important that people know what's happening.
Very important.
Not just courts, but local council meetings. All of those types of things that were done routinely that just aren't going to be done. Because
from a crime point of view, these guys, are somewhat attempting to live under the radar in these sort of regional areas in particular. Then all the resources is put into trying to dismantle the grouping. All the details is gathered, which is very interesting for all of us. And the court case goes ahead and no one there's recorded.
Yeah, exactly. You know?
And
I mean, people don't
I think
then
as
know.
well we could do it a little bit more, in the north you can get these site links and you can actually, I think since COVID they kept up a lot of what was going on. I remember during COVID being able to attend the CAB hearings remotely, and it was really, really handy.
Yeah.
But we haven't kind of moved with the times with that. If you could even have the courts more
Virtual.
open to that, virtual, it would help, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, they are now, I think, going to start screening the Supreme Court hearings, I think, aren't they? That's going to to be a new thing.
They're the most boring. I mean, who wants to listen to the Supreme Courts?
Yeah,
in all my time covering the courts, the best was ever was the district court.
Always.
Yeah,
You see every form of humanity coming in and out of those courts. It's amazing.
the district courts and some of the stuff that comes out of the Midlands courts, like Longford courts. Yeah, it's amazing stuff. Amazing in sense of shocking, but
I remember when I used to do Tala District Court and Rathfarnham District Court now 30 years ago, and these largely young lads were coming in with sort of drug-related issues, crimes. They were charged with possessions and all the rest of it. And what was really interesting was often it was the grandmother coming with them, because these were second generation, third generation. There was addiction issues in the family. The grandmothers were rearing them. And it was an interesting snapshot into real life.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Then obviously you had some of the quirky cases. I remember one fella came down a mountain on a bicycle with no saddle. It was all very strange, and he was convicted, or he was certain.
What? I don't know if that's
well, no,
crime,
for
is it?
something
What do you mean with no
lewd,
saddle?
Niall.
What was he sitting on?
It was something lewd, the story. I mean, come on, get with the programme, the two of
Well,
you.
just
I
say,
still
if-
don't get it. You're going to explain that to me after.
He had taken the saddle off the bicycle and come
okay.
down a mountain on it,
Oh my
on the
God.
bicycle. Yeah, and the poor fella was obviously, there was
Eimear
some
now,
sort
it
of...
won't be.
Oh,
No,
Eimear,
I mean, look,
there was
if-
mental health there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I should.
But it has remained in my head, that story, because I just remember just being absolutely horrified when the penny dropped what had actually gone on.
God, all my innocence is gone now.
There's always something, and we just end on this, I think.
What do we have?
We have a local reporter in Cork who sends us in copies.
Right.
Cork man who told Garda she had juicy knockers gets suspended sentence.
He just wants it. That's like Niall. This is snapshot what Niall is like on a
knockers.
Saturday. He gets into his giddy side.
It's very carry on.
He just loves being able to use that word, those two words, juicy knockers.
It's
But he
in
has
our-
justification for it. It's not me being weird. It's just the fact that it was on a story.
You published it, so you can take responsibility.
Oh,
It's
the
on the
regionals,
Yeah,
what goes
they're
on
great.
and around outside the city is just shocking.
He wanted a burger. He
Yeah.
wanted to get. He wasn't allowed into the takeaway to get a burger, and this is what happens.
Yeah, you could be told worse. Sorry, I'm a 1970s.
You're gonna have feminist onto you now.
I definitely think we should end the podcast.
We should, before I get cancelled. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.